All right, Rabbi Say Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Machin Leira online smicha. As we are learning different inyanim in Hilchos Shabbos, I want to show you how something very, very simple, that it's a common thing that we use, has many shilas in Hilchos Shabbos. Everybody knows, and it's a minig by many people, that you wake up in the morning, you say brachas, you take a cup of coffee, and there's actually a geschmack chassidish deher with a morning cup of coffee. The deher is that a person says brachas and all that, and he takes a cup of coffee. How does he start the coffee with? He puts in some coffee, ground coffee or coffee beans. That's bitter. He balances it out, and he puts in sugar or sweet and low or whatever. That's sweet. Then he puts in water that's hot. And to balance it out, he puts in, being that the coffee is too hot and it's black, he puts in milk that's cold. So you give a look at that cup of coffee, and you have sweet, sweet, bitter, hot, cold, and right in the morning you say shahakol nia bidvare, whatever the day will send, sweet or sour, chas v'sholom, hot or cold, everything we know is in the name of Hashem. Everything's happening with Hashem's understanding and Hashem's will, which is a phenomenal lesson. They actually say that one of the reasons that why Hasidim say l'chaim specifically on vodka and not necessarily on wine, even though wine is more chashiv, is because by wine you make the bracha of Bayer Pri HaGofen. The Hasidim are trying to stress ha'kol nia b'dvarei. Whatever is sent to you, whatever happens to you, is all in all Hashem's making. So you keep on stressing that you feel the presence of Hashem in everything of your day. So you make a morning cup of coffee, which is, by the way, a shaila for itself. What are you allowed to eat? What are you allowed to drink before davening? Which we all know there's the big difference between the chumras of how the Mishnah Brura and how the Litvisha world takes it. If you're allowed to make even coffee with milk and with sugar, would that be too much before you daven? Until we have our approach, that's the beser eser farin daven and vidaven and farin eser. It's better that a person eats, so he should be able to daven properly than to rush through a davening, so he should be able to have something to eat. All right, but let's talk about Shabbos morning. You're making coffee. So how to make coffee? If you need a kli sheni or kli shlishi, because it's ground coffee beans, it's instant coffee, it's ground coffee. That's the difference between bishul acha bishul, and it is a davar yavesh that becomes lach. That's a topic for itself, because even if it was already processed and it became yavesh, but yesh bishul acha bishul bedavar lach, and the coffee, the ground coffee, becomes liquidy. So that's a discussion for a different shir that we had. Today I'm going to speak about the sugar. You're putting in sugar in your coffee. When you put in sugar or sugar cubes in your coffee, I found three bullets that you have to dodge to make sure that you don't do something wrong. I always say, I once had a shir from a prominent rabbi that gave in our program in Hilchos Shabbos, and he marked down that if you don't know what you're doing in Hilchos Shabbos, for a simple egg salad, you could be over on 10 issues. And now I'm going to tell you about cubes, about sugar cubes, or putting cubes into coffee, into a hot cup of tea, could be three issues at least up for discussion. What are the three issues? Issue number one is noilad. Noilad means to say you have just like we spoke about ice and water, the ice into a Coca-Cola or anything. It was originally in one form and it changed to another form. A second discussion that has to be dealt with, bishul, as mentioned before, even if the sugar was already processed and already boiled, but because yesh bishul achar bishul b'davar lach, do I have to be concerned that the sugar is boiling again? And then, what if you have not ground sugar, what if you like cube sugar? Could you crush the cube sugar and put it in? And even if you're not crushing it, could you let a cube dissolve into pieces in the hot water? Now I'm sure you're looking at me. Why am I looking to make problems? I'm not looking. I just want to. Now that we're finishing the topic of Hilchos Shabbos in these simanim, let's cover 3 halachas for a simple cube sugar. So, in siman, let's start with. We'll discuss this based on the order of how it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. Siman Shin Yutes speaks about bishul. So what does it say in Hilchas Bishul about salt and sugar? So it says that the Alter Rebbe, we know the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur says one thing, and in the Shulchan Aruch says another thing. So the Mishnah Brura in Sif Katan Ayin Aleph, he writes like this: Melach sha'osim mimayim shemevashel ma'asei. Salt that's made from water that was boiled, ein boy mishum bishul. To put it into something will not be mevashel because ein bishul achar bishul. And he says v'chein besukar. So too is sugar. You're even allowed to put in sugar into a kli rishon as long as it's off the fire. However, says the Mishnah Brura, there are those that are machmir to stay away from a kli rishon. So according to the Mishnah Brura, sugar, you would have to stay away from a kli rishon, but a kli sheni, no. Now, why is he machmir? Why he starts off saying ein by mishum bishul lacha bishul, but then he says stay away from a kli rishon. So the answer is because in Shari Tshuva Sif Katan Hey, he discusses the matter that the Alter Rebbe discusses too, where you take something which originates as something dry, but you melt it and it becomes liquid. We know that yesh bishul achar bishul b'davar lach. So that's a machlokes. Do you look at it at the original state and ein bishul achar bishul, or do you look at it at the final state and yesh bishul achar bishul? So because of that machlokes, he says stay away from a kli rishon. Do not put sugar in a kli rishon, even if it's off the fire. However, a kli sheni, he doesn't have a problem with it. So salt, sugar, coffee, instant coffee, all these things that because they were processed already once, it will depend on this machlokes how far you have to be machmir. There are those that say that when you put it in the kli sheni, which I said you're allowed to, that's only if the water goes into the kli sheni first. But if you put the coffee or the sugar in the kli sheni first, and you do irui mikli rishon over it, even that should not be done. But if you put the water in the cup, and only then you put the sugar, so now there are many that are mekel in a kli sheni. We know that there are many that are machmir, that even in a kli sheni it should not be done. You should put the sugar only in a kli shlishi. The sugar, the coffee, the salt, whatever we're worried about it, yesh bishul achar bishul. So, and it's possibly kalei bishul. So only in a kli shlishi you would put it in. There is actually, I must tell you, there is actually an opinion that holds that even in a kli shlishi, if it's very, very hot, you don't put it in, but that's already pushing it. So, what are the opinions about bishul and sugar? In a kli rishon off the fire, some say even that's allowed. If you don't look at the fact that it's now dissolved, if you consider it how it was in the beginning. In a kli sheni, many people allow it. And a Kli Shlishi, almost all opinions allow a Kli Shlishi. There's one opinion that doesn't even allow a Kli Shlishi if it's Yatzei Ledas. All right, that's about the cooking part. Let's go over to the melting part. The part that you put in sugar into hot water, it's going to melt. It's going to melt. So, and by melting, it's sort of the same problem we have with ice water or ice, that the ice melts and it becomes from ice into solid, into liquid. So what did we do? How did we discuss the issue of ice? We said if the ice melts straight into water, so what's melted is not visible, you don't see, then you have no issue, right? If the water is visible, if what was created is visible, then we have a problem. So the Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Shin Chaf, Seif Chaf Dalid, he says that's taka the reason why people put sugar in tea and coffee, because it melts into water and you don't see it. And he says not only, obviously, to let it melt by itself, it's less of a problem. Even to stir the sugar, to stir it, that it should melt because it's not noticeable when it melts. The Aruch HaShulchan says that would be allowed. The Mechaber seems to be machmir, stirring, causing things to melt. If it melts on its own, if the ice cube melts on its own, that's not such a problem. But to make the ice cube melt, even though you don't see it, the Mechaber has a problem. So the Mechaber would not allow you to stir tea that has sugar in it, because you're causing it biyadayim to melt. Because the fact is, according to some poskim, ice water is even less of a problem than sugar, because sugar, without stirring it, will not melt everywhere. If you put in sugar and you don't stir, it will stay in the bottom of the cup. Ice will melt. So your action of stirring it is actually causing the melting. So some want to say that the Mechaber will not allow you to stir sugar in a cup, because you're causing it to melt. And it's brought, who is this? The Kaf HaChaim Mesif Katan Samach says that, and others are only makel if you really need it l'tzarech archim, but to stir it, according to the Mechaber, would be taka problem. However, in Tzitz Eliezer Chelik Vav Simen Lamed Daled, he says there's a big difference between snow and sugar. The difference is like this: snow or hail is not considered food. So if you stir it, or it's melting it, it's now becoming considered food. That's a new creation. Sugar, however, even before it's melted, it's edible. A lot of people suck on the sugar cubes. So therefore, even the Mechaber says that Tzitz Eliezer will not have a problem by you stirring the sugar in the cup of tea, because you're not really changing anything. It's really the same food before, just a different, it's like food cut up in small pieces. You didn't really change anything. So now we covered two parts. We covered the fact that sugar is going to cook, and we said that has to be either in a Kli Sheni or in a Kli Shlishi. And we also covered the fact whether or not I have to be concerned that the sugar is changing its form from sugar or flakes or cubes into liquid. That's a chash schita, chash noilid. Then there is the next thing that we have to be concerned, and that is in Simen Shin Chaf Aleph, we talk about grinding. So the question is, if somebody has sugar cubes, and the sugar cubes, it's being ground, it's becoming flaky again. That is what toichen is. Forget about noiled. That's a new creation. The grinding part, to grind it, would that be toichen? So remember in Siman Shin Chof Aleph, we learned that ein tchina achar tchina. Ein tchina achar tchina means things that were already ground, that got stuck together, and it's being reground into flakes, into pieces, is not really a shaila of toichen. Because what is toichen in its original sense is taking a solid food and chiseling it down and shredding it down. But something that was originally shredded already, just pasted together, it by itself, it's already ground. So the Pri Megadim in Sif Ches, in Siman Shin Chof Aleph, writes, Suker gam kein dinoi k'moi melech zeh. That sugar, because the Ramah says that salt, if it was flaky, and because of the process done to the salt, it stuck together, you're allowed to crush salt. Because it was originally, it was flaky too, originally. So crushing it, it's ein tchina achat tchina. The Pri Megadim says, just like by salt, the Ramah says that, sugar will have the same din. Rabbi Akiva Eger, in Siman Shin Beis, Se'iv Zayin, asks a very powerful question. His question is, we all know, this is something you have to be very careful. You get dirty on Shabbos, or your bottom of your shoe gets dirty on Shabbos, or something on your kapata, some mud on your kapata on Shabbos, it's very difficult, halacha, how to remove that. Because there is a problem of melabein, sometimes you're cleaning, which you're not allowed to do, and sometimes the mud, whatever schmutz came on there, if you scrape it, you're being over toichen, an extension of toichen. You're taking a solid piece of schmutz, and you're crumbling it. Crumbling it is a problem. Is sort of an extension of toichen. So that Rabbi Akiva Eger and Siman Shin Beis Siv Zayin asks, why is that toichen? That mud, that was loose sand originally. It was because. One second. Huh? One second. Let me finish this. That mud was loose sand originally. Only because it became wet, it stuck together. If you believe in this premise, in this yesod, that ein tchina achar tchina, if you believe in this, one second, if you believe in this yesod, that ein tchina achar tchina, then you shouldn't have a problem. You shouldn't have a problem scraping it off. So why is there even an issue? Why is there even an issue? So over here we find different answers. The Chazon Ish answers that this that we say ein tchina achar tchina, that's only by things if a person wants to separate something that was put together by man, like bread was loose flour, and loose flour you made into a dough, you made into bread, then the man-made build-up you could separate. If it was originally loose. But something that's let me read the words. Hadam rinen ein toichen acher toichen. This that we don't allow, there's no issue of tchina acher tchina. That's only b'hafrada shel chibur b'nei adam. But hafrada, to separate something that happened naturally, like mud, the water, just the natural status of the water mixing with mud causes this to happen. Then by separating it, you will taka be over mishum toichen. And therefore, he says, you're not allowed to melt wax, even though it originally was loose pieces of fat or something like that, because once it was made min hashamayim, you can't separate it. So therefore, he answers Rabbi Akiva Eger's question that because the mud was done by heaven, it was made, the loose pieces became as one from Shamayim, you can't separate it. In Sefer Shvisas Shabbos, he says, Ein toichen achar toichen, that is only if the dibuk, if the connection when the things stuck together, didn't stick in such a way where it's very difficult to separate. For example, flour becomes bread. It's not so, bread to make it into crumbs is not a big deal. But if the thing becomes so hard that you have to do something intense to grind it, then you don't say the original. Then the original tchina, the fact that it was originally loose, is already gone. So then you don't say ye'ein teichen achar teichen. And based on this, some people say that sugar cubes, because it went from mamash loose to a hard cube, since it became a hard cube, the flakiness is gone. And now if anybody grinds that cube into flakes, it would be a question of teichen. And therefore, the people are machmir, but the Ktsois HaShulchan in Siman Kuf Chav Tes Sif Katan Tes Vav says no problem. You have no, because the sugar was originally loose. Even though it became a cube, ain't tchina acher. Tchina, don't worry about all this, and there's no problem.